Before I get into more tales of adventures in mechanics or diving into manure pits or other fairy tales, I have something else to ramble on about that sort of relates back to episode 14 of Years and Years Ago by Any Other Name, Part 2. Not only have I been known by different names throughout my life, but more times than I care to admit, I've been misidentified as someone else. And embarrassingly, always someone much older. Believe it or not, this whole thing started way back when I was in high school. Early in 1967, my junior year, I was picked to play the role of Sitting Bull, the oldest character in the musical Annie Get Your Gun. Why was I picked for that role? Well, according to Don Romay, head of the music department, because I walk like an old man. Really? Of course, I did have that awful habit of not picking up my feet. I had inherited a few generations worth of bad backs, and at my tender mid-teen years had already been battered by several years of jackassing hay bales, feed bags, milk cans, and shoveling silage and shoveling manure. Yeah, I walked like an old man long before I was old enough to be a young man. Then there was the fact that I was shaving by the time I was in junior high. To you Gen Xers and Zers, that's middle school. And by the time of my senior year, I was beginning to turn gray at the temples. Most likely because of that, in my senior year, I landed roles in 2 other plays, both of older men. If that wasn't enough, in my 2 years at the State University at Cobleskill, I ended up in 2 more plays with roles of old men. By then it was typecasting. Years later, a fellow Valley Central High School classmate made the observation, before I was young, I was old. After college, whenever my coworkers weren't calling me Scuffy, they would refer to me as the old man. And that was by people older than me. They'd say I moved a bit on the slow side. I would never argue with that. When I worked at something, I'd only rush things if there was an emergency involved. Otherwise, I took my time and got my work done right, the first time through. No one ever complained about that. Still, an elderly persona emerged and stuck with me up until the years when I became old for real. Hell, my wife thought I acted like an old man when we first met in September 1967. Funny thing, though, 5 years later, she married me anyway. My daughter and that guy that edits and mixes these voiceovers have always called me the old man. Even Joe DeBello, my late, great older friend, 8 years older to be exact, had a fun stunt of introducing me as his old man. People actually believed him. Sad to say, it gets worse. I have some t-shirts I wear that commemorate the 70th and 75th anniversary of the D-Day landings in Normandy, France. Recently, on 3 different occasions, I was asked if I was there to storm the beaches in 1944, 6 years before I was born. As they say, you just can't make this stuff up. On the other hand, my granddaughter, bless her heart, just thinks of me as a big kid with white hair and a beard. Yeah, white hair and a beard. Santa Claus. In 1997, after my hair, what's left of it, went from gray to completely white, I chose to permanently grow and maintain a full beard. After enduring my old pal Paul Hankey at Rosedale Nurseries calling me Moses and comparing me to Charlton Heston's portrayal of Moses, which I actually took as a compliment, calling me Santa Claus became the rage among my family, co-workers, and friends. Other than the white hair and beard, I didn't see the slightest resemblance. I was far from appearing as a beanpole, but I was also quite far from appearing as stout as that so-called rotund old elf. It seemed I would always run into other old guys that looked a lot more like Santa than me. It never made much sense to me, but after a while I got used to it. I figured it was just a joke I would have to be resigned to accept. After a while, I actually came to enjoy it. Countless times while out in public, children would run up to me and say, "Hello, Santa." I'd even get hugs. Eventually, I got into the habit, around late summer, to let my hair and beard grow longer. By the beginning of the Christmas season, I had almost convinced myself there was at least some sort of resemblance to that old man in red. I'd even wear a red shirt and a Santa hat. Down here in Florida, I would, and still do, make several visits to Disney World during the holiday season. Kids would go wild. Dozens of times I would whisper to a smiling, wide-eyed youngster, "Yeah, ho, 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 it's me, but don't tell anyone." Being a dead ringer for Santa ain't so bad. Yep, being an old guy does have some fun perks. Well, then, there was that time a few years ago up in New York at the Quickway Diner in Bloomingburg. My mother and brother Jim and I were having lunch. Across the dining room, I could see a little boy sitting with his family at another table, staring at me the whole time we were eating. I figured he was no older than 4, and his eyes were as wide and his jaw dropped as ever I've seen on a little tyke. I was getting my Santa shtick ready when he finally got up the nerve to get up and walk over to our table. Before I could let go with a jolly ho, 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 he sort of, in a little boy fashion, timidly asked me, "Are you the Pope?" Darn. I didn't see that coming.